We start another week without the Prime Minister. He's off to Brazil today. Well, he went yesterday, I think. And one of the things that I saw from Robert Peston last night, he was literally tweeting from the back of the plane the Prime Minister was on, saying, we're not quite sure what Starmer's going to say about Biden's decision to sell long-range missiles to Ukraine as almost his last act as president. As far as I'm reading this morning, I don't think Starmer's said anything yet, has he?
No, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he supports it. He seems to have more interest in what's going on abroad and helping countries abroad than what's going on in the UK. I think that the amount of trips that he's been taking in the past few weeks is just crazy, considering what's going on in this country. We've had riots, we've had police locking people up for tweets. There's a real almost crisis in the UK right now, and to see him just traveling around the world like this is really quite absurd. I know it's usually quite a popular thing, I think, with leaders when they're seen with other leaders in terms of polling wise and for like the audience, it's a sign of strength and power. But I think in this circumstance, it's really unjust and unworthy, because we are in a serious problem here in the UK, and I think there needs to be some accountability.
Well, you think he would spend a bit more time, considering that he spends most of his time telling us how the Tories ruined Britain and he's busy rebuilding it. I mean, in fact, let's have a look at his new ad this weekend, because this is what he claims he's doing. And let me just ask you this question before you see this. Tell me afterwards how much of it is actually based in any kind of reality. Have a look.
The budget will light the way, and we will use the power of government, stability, investment and reform, partnership across the whole of society, galvanised by clear objectives to deliver on the priorities of the British people. Foundations fixed, public services renewed, a country rebuilt by investment, released from decline, returned once more to the service of working people.
The service of working people. He's also said this: the question is what I am spending my time doing, not where I am. Well, in that case, he might as well be, anywhere. He might as well just redeploy himself to Barbados and sit there on a sun lounger and say, don't worry, I'm in constant touch with all of my people in Britain. Maybe this explains why he doesn't like staying at home. He spends more time in Lord Ali's flat. Maybe he just doesn't feel comfortable being in one place. I don't know.
Well, it's confusing, because I think you need your leader of the country in the country. I think it's quite straightforward. Just being Keir Starmer in the UK is only going to be more beneficial for him than not. It seems like he's almost hiding by doing these around the world trips. I think it makes him, there is that perception when you're around other world leaders, it makes you look also like a world leader and very strong. I think maybe that's what he thinks, but it's far from the case when his own country is having the issues that we're having right now. So I think that's a really strange kind of tactic. I think he's going to embed himself more in these sort of international matters to try and hide away from what's going on at home. Hence the push to meet President Xi. Hence I have no doubt he'll support Biden in this Russia-Ukraine, the escalation in that war there. I think anything he can get away from the UK will carry on doing. You see with so you mentioned about him taking 470 delegates to the top meeting, and it's ironic. Well, you're talking about climate change and he's taking more and more people on a plane to another place. It's pure hypocrisy. Makes no sense. Rather than spending all that money traveling around the world, maybe instead you don't do what you're doing with the inheritance tax relief for the farmers, maybe cut spending there. We want to go, he's saying within 10 years, cut down emissions. One of the ways to cut down emissions is to support local produced products and making sure that our farmers produce more goods. We saw it during COVID-19 how important farmers really are when we had the restrictions and inability to get as many goods from abroad. So it just makes quite common sense to then support those agricultural people to make sure that they produce more, so we don't have to go out and pay other countries to produce food. It seems quite common sense again, and that would probably reduce the carbon emissions if we're having to import less. But I just think a lot of what he's doing is he's not thinking about working class people, which is, I think what Labour Party was founded on 100 or whatever years ago.
Well, I don't think he understands what they need and what people in this country want. I mean, when you look at the words that he was uttering there, when he was talking about rebuilding the country, the light shining from the budget. I mean, the budget was an unmitigated disaster. Nobody thinks the budget was any good. Business doesn't think it's any good. The farmers are going practically on strike as a result. There could be food shortages because they're going to They don't want to do it, but they're going to have to make some kind of a stand. He's not going to be here when they arrive in Parliament or in Westminster tomorrow for a demonstration. He hasn't spoken to them. He didn't speak to them when he went to the Welsh Labour Party conference. You know, this guy seems to me to be completely and utterly useless, and with every day that passes, more and more incapable of actually even running the country and doing the job of Prime Minister.
I honestly, I've come to the conclusion, I think him and his cabinet, I just don't think they care about working class people remotely. I just cannot understand some of the decisions they've made. It seems the decisions on what they talk about is for people of London and for people who belong to maybe the dinner parties in London. Aside from those people, anything else that's coming out of his mouth, I just cannot understand how that is good for us as a country. Lots of these statements are, a lot of these now policies, they don't really make much sense aside from looking to look good rather than actually doing any good. It's this obsession with the climate, you know, it's going to have such a negative impact on our country here. It just seems to me that there's a real almost hatred, disdain towards working class people. They just don't care, or they just don't seem to think that it really matters. And I think that's reflective in how much he's traveling around right now. Was there any need for him to go to Baku when other world leaders didn't go? Was there a need to take 470 people? Would it have made sense just to take just for Ed Miliband to go with 1 or 2 people from his team? Maybe that would be a bit more sensitive to what's going on in the UK. You know, it's just ironic. You're going to a climate change event and you're taking the most amount of people. You're causing the most carbon emissions. It just stinks of hypocrisy, and I think it's really sad, because at the end of the day, the people who are going to be hurt by a lot of these policies, it's not going to be him, it's not going to be his cabinet, it's not going to be anyone in the Westminster London bubble, it's going to be the rest of the country. And do they even care? Do they have the capacity to actually go outside and speak to these people and care? I seriously don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. And this business of cozying up to China, I mean, we've got MPs who are still sitting in Parliament who basically have been sanctioned by China, who have been told they're on a sort of a no-fly list, if you like, not allowed to go to China, possibly victims of spying by China. And yet here he is saying, we want a pragmatic, serious relationship with President Xi. I mean, I don't know what he means by that. Is he going to give them concessions? Is he going to give them trade deals? What's he going to do exactly? And who gave him the mandate for this?
I think in a lot of things, China is a much bigger threat to the West than Russia is. And I think that it's a really difficult thing for a lot of people to understand. I think because of the Cold War era, we've always seen the Soviet Union and Russia as the natural enemy in some ways. But the reality is China is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. But again, but
there's a reason for that. One of the reasons it's the fastest growing economies of the world is because it enslaves its people. Exactly. It makes them work for literally zero money. It's committing genocide against the Uyghur Muslims, and it creates a kind of hegemony against anybody who it doesn't like. And it's basically taken over the mineral rights of Africa, the mineral rights of South America. It's building military infrastructures all over the South Pacific. That's why it's very successful.
Yeah, but it's ironic because you'll see the Labour Party, David Lammy, and more people amongst them will constantly talk about what Britain did in terms of slavery and colonialisation, and you now see the Prime Minister of our country going to a country that practices it today in 2024. We're obsessed with talking about what Britain did 100 years ago and whatever, but we're now opening our arms to a country that's doing that right now. Yeah. And you will not see many people who will actually advocate and talk about this because it just doesn't suit their agenda. Again, he's talked so much about climate change. The country if we're being completely frank and honest, it's making no difference because all that we're cutting our carbon emissions. The country that is the largest country in the world in terms of population, in terms of carbon emissions, they're just increasing. So all we're doing is making our country poorer. And this idea that manufacturing is going to die and it's dying is nonsense, because all that's happening is we're manufacturing less and less and less, and China manufacturing more and more and more. So those carbon emissions are just getting transferred across to another country. It all goes into the same sky. So I think this concept that that by us reducing manufacturing, all we're doing is making our own country poorer. We're cutting the amount of jobs that people have access to. So I don't think our country is a good country for any blue-collar worker. It's not. I don't think we're actually sitting here thinking about the implications of forcing everyone to go to university when the reality is that unless you go to university, you can't get a job. There's no, we should be sitting here talking about apprenticeship schemes and how we can get our labour force working, how we can get manufacturing going, we should be supporting the farmers, all this sort of stuff. And you would have thought COVID-19 would have maybe taught us that how important it is to be two things: energy independent, so to produce our own cheap energy, and also to make sure that we had our own food supplies. These were quite two drastic things that only happened 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It seems like we've completely forgotten all about that, and we've gone back to these ideologies that a lot of people, I think, are forcing themselves to believe in. It's almost like a cult-like way of being for a lot of the left and the Labour Party, and it's sad that our Prime Minister is almost falling into this trap.
Yeah. Well, he's completely captured by these people who appear to be influencing more than ordinary people because he doesn't talk to ordinary people. He's not interested, doesn't know how to do it. Sunil, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. We've got to run. Sunil Sharma, founder and CEO of the Global Conservative Union.